So today we have my cute little intro spiel. That's what this was. Y'all are used to this. Y'all know how I roll. Most of you have been here multiple times and you're like, yep, this is Jessica. This is what she does. She talks about herself and she talks about the internet and then she talks about what we're going to do. I'm a creature of habit. So we got a couple things we're going to do. We're going to do an overview of cellular communication. So just the basic types. There's 4 of them. You're going to be an expert by the end of this if you're not Elena and Dakota, who obviously already are. We're going to look at some examples. So like, where does this actually occur in the human body? Spoiler alert, airware. And then finally, the part that everyone really likes because it helps them prep for tests, looking at you, Dakota, the practice safety questions. So all aboard? Ready to drive this train down to the next step? I can't see any of your faces shaking your head, so I'm going to assume that means go. Ta-da! Okay, so I want you to think about how people communicate. Thank you for the thumbs up, Dakota. That is very affirming for me. I want you to think about how we communicate because humans, if you're like me, you just like to talk at things, even if it's at a brick wall or even if it's at a computer screen. I'm really good at talking to things. I have my dog and I talk to her constantly. I have my husband and I talk to him constantly. And now I'm talking to you guys because my dog and my husband are going to sleep. So here we are. But we communicate in a bunch of different ways. We do it through verbal things, verbal signals, whether you're a dolphin that's chirping at things or sending little sonar signals. We do it electronically through telephone signals and radar. And we have nonverbal communication. So whenever I talk about nonverbal communication, I always think of like that classic Parent Trap handshake. You guys, I hope y'all have seen the Parent Trap, right? Because if you haven't, we may need to take a detour. Okay, good. Thank you. Whew. Yes. Okay, good. So the Parent Trap, I always think of that iconic scene where Lindsay Lohan and the butler Martin, they do that like handshake, and it's like a perfect example of nonverbal communication. They know every move. They know exactly what to do. Human communication is actually primarily nonverbal. So even though I'm talking at you right now, like my eyebrows are wiggling around, I'm moving my hands, I've got this whole song and dance going for you. And that's why we like this platform. Instead of you guys just watching like a video on the internet, you watch this video on the internet because you get to see my face. And the theory is that my face makes it more engaging. I don't know if that's true or not, but the research seems to point at it. So I guess I should say as a scientist that, yeah, it is true. So, woohoo. So we communicate in a lot of different ways, but that's at a macro level. What about that micro level? What about with cells? Cells communicate in a couple of different ways. Actually, 4 different ways. And it can be through direct contact with another cell. It can be long distance. They can do long distance calls. For the record, that was a thing before we had cell phones. You had to pay extra money to call long distance. So like if you were in Los Angeles and you wanted to call someone in like San Diego, it was a long distance call. It wasn't in the same city. It cost extra money. It cost a lot of money. Now we all have cell phones and like they don't charge us for talking on them. They just charge us for our data because it's a gold mine for them. But cells communicate. They can be right next to each other. They can be close to something, or they can even send something long distance. They have a bunch of different ways they're going to do this. And so that's going to be autocrine, endocrine, paracrine, and juxtacrine. Has anyone ever heard of the doctor, an endocrinologist? An endocrinologist. Yes, yes, yes. What does an endocrinologist do? What does an endocrinologist do? Think, think, think. They do stuff. What kind of stuff? I can't see your screen, so you can Google it and I'll never know. Endo means inside. Very good. Soleil. Dakota deals with hormones. Very good. So these are dealing with all the signaling that's going on inside your body, coming from one organ and having to get to all the other organs. That's what hormones do. And so endocrine is going to be hormonal. So it's going to start in one spot in your body and it's going to travel through your bloodstream all the way to some other part of your body. It fascinates me and we'll get in depth on that. We also have autocrine. Can anyone tell me about autocrine signaling? What does auto mean? Self-signaling. Very good, Sarah. So the cell is actually releasing whatever little signal molecule it has, And it's receiving it on its own ligand, on its own receptor. So it would be kind of like if I signaled myself, hey, want to go get coffee? And I responded to myself, yes, I would love coffee. It's the best example I can come up with. But we signal ourselves things to do all the time. Cells have to do it as well. King Long, I'm glad you're smiling. I'm hoping that means you think my metaphor makes sense. Let's also talk about paracrine. So what is paracrine signaling going to be? It's paracrine. Paracrine. Para. What does para mean? Sends to other cells. Okay. Are those cells close by or far away? Near. Very good, Elena. So these are going to be cells. It's kind of like diffusion. They release that chemical, whatever it is, that molecule, that mineral, and the other cells pick it up. They have to be semi-close though. And it is a diffusion process. So it goes from high to low, it goes along the gradient, it just releases it into the wide unknown. The way that I think of it is, if you've ever blown on those flowers that have like the little feathers on them, not daffodils. What are those flowers that you blow on? Dandelions. It's like a dandelion. When you blow on a dandelion and it just disappears off into the wind, that's what I think of paracrine like. It's not necessarily going to get very far just from you blowing on a flower, but it's going to signal to something nearby and then grow. All right, let's talk about contact-dependent signaling. What's another name for contact-dependent signaling? I'll give you a hint, it's in the slide. I shouldn't have asked that question. Who here is reading the slide? Juxtacrine, very good, Dakota. So juxtacrine, these are cells that actually have to be right next to each other in order to receive those signals. They can't be far off. They've got to be right next to each other. And they have to have a receptor that actually connects. And so we're going to talk about that. But these are the different types of signaling that your cells are going to use, just depending on what's going on and what they need and how far they need that signal to go. So the main driver is going to be, how far do we need to send this? Have any of you ever sent a package like through UPS or FedEx or something? Maybe had to return an Amazon package? Yes. Okay, Dakota. Anyone else ever had to like send a package? Kimura, yeah. What do you guys notice happens whenever you send a package further away? If I want to send a package from here to like Taiwan, what's going to happen? It costs way more. It is so unfair. I'm just like, it can't really be that bad. And it takes longer. That's a very good point, Soleil. So it costs more and it takes longer. So the further you want to send something through your body, whether it starts in the top of your brain and goes to your toe, it's going to take more energy to get it there. It's going to take more time to get it there, as opposed to if it starts in my brain and I just want to go to like my ear, which I'm sure I have things that do that, but those won't take as much time and they won't take as much energy. Does anyone have any questions about these 4 methods of communication? Because these are going to be the primary ones that you're going to see in AP. 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm gonna head out. See what I did there? So let's talk a little bit about whenever they communicate. Is it important to know which one is long distance? Yes, Dakota. So endocrine is always gonna be that long distance one. Endocrine is the only one that will be long distance. The others, like paracrine, I mean, in theory, paracrine could go long distance, but in reality, whatever signal it sends will probably get lost by the time it actually hits something. I always think of that as like, oh, we send signals into outer space to send to aliens or something. The reality is that signal is probably going to get lost before we get it somewhere intended. Endocrine, that's the only thing that's guaranteed to get where it's supposed to go. And we're going to talk about that. So endocrine is your long distance one. Any further questions? I see we got some other people hopping on. Hello, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Jessica, in case you didn't hear my name, Emma Spiel. Dakota, you're very welcome. Let's talk about that short distance before we get into the long distance. So I always think of this as like, because I'm a troll, this whole I'm not touching you. It's like they're right next to each other. They're like, okay, baby, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And will they? just depends. So cells are going to communicate over short distances using very specific regulators that have to hit that very specific cell. And so we call these, we have these receptors, we have ligands, and they're going to trigger a whole metabolic pathway of a reaction. We call that a signal transduction. I'm not going to get into that tonight because that's for December 5th. But these are going to be really, really short. Wherever the messenger gets released from, it's going to be really close to its destination. So I think of it as like, let's say you're going from your math class to your history class. They're in, hopefully this metaphor works for you guys. They're in the same building, if not on the same campus, your math and history class. They're on the same campus. And so you're going to be pretty close and pretty easily able to go from one place to the next. Whereas there are other things like, say, I don't know, the elementary school. That's going to be a little further. You may need your car to get there. You may need to walk a significant difference. Different things. I do want y'all to notice also, I have this thing. What's this thing that I'm circling with my little red pointer? What's that? I'm really excited about it. I told y'all a minute ago, I love these synapses. These are in your brain. You got them everywhere. Whenever they put those like skull caps on people in the movie with all the electrodes that they glue on them, they're trying to measure those things and how much energy they're doing. And it's fascinating. Never had one on my own brain. Kind of jealous I haven't, because I'm just like, I want to know what my brain's doing. Is it doing good stuff? Is it like electric or whatever? I don't know. No one's done a brain scan on me yet. But synapses are constantly firing. They are constantly releasing these things, these neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters, once they're released, they have to attach to a receptor. Once you get enough attached to a receptor, that's how you get a response. That's how you're going to get certain emotional regulator molecules. That's how you're going to get certain emotional response. That's how you're also going to get certain physical response. It just depends on what receptor it is and what hormone or molecule you're releasing. But again, this is all going to be very short distance. Like this is going to be from my synapse that's right here to my synapse that's right here. Or my synapse that's right here to my synapse that's right here. These are not things that are going to go from here to here. To be clear, they can go from here to here, but they're not just going to hop there. They have to go down a railway line of synapses in my brain, hundreds of thousands of them. So it's almost like, y'all ever done the wave? You know that thing they do at like pep rallies and stuff where they're like, we're going to do the wave, we're going to do the wave. And so the person who starts is like, all right, I'm going to start. And they go whoosh. And then the person down the line goes whoosh. And then it just keeps going. Synapses are like the wave. They go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And that's what they do. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that short distance communication? 3, 2, 1. All right, let's talk about long distance because this one already came up a little bit. So long distance communication, this is when they're just worlds apart, the drifting. This right here is going to be the endocrine. This long distance is endocrine. Everything else is generally going to be short distance. Does that answer your question, Soleil? The first one? Okay, these are typically, from the looks of them, so you guys help me out. What do these look like? Are they autocrine? Are they juxtacrine? Are they paracrine? What do y'all think? Okay, Dakota says paracrine. Do you think Sarah says paracrine? Or juxtacrine, paracrine? Okay, so I would say for sure this one here on the left is paracrine. Something nearby must have released that ligand to go to that receptor. For the synapse, keep in mind that those synapses are right next to each other. They are very, very close together. I would almost lean towards identifying those synapses as just juxtacrine. Since they are so close together, that receptor is basically touching the other synapse. And if you see diagrams of them, when you draw them out, as we're going to do in our next session, the axons and the dendrites, they are in contact with one another. So I would consider the synapse to be juxtacrine. I would consider the one on the left to be paracrine. Does that help? So like, you're welcome. Hi, long distance. Long distance. Everything's far away. Except actually it's kind of good because you can make stuff like in your pancreas and send it everywhere else, which is kind of nice. Because if you had to make it all over your body, you would just be a giant pancreatic blob. And I don't know about y'all. I like not being a blob and having a shape. It's nice. If you've ever seen the movie The Blob, you know the blob is also very cranky. So signals are going to be released by certain cells that can travel very long distances to reach other cells. They don't even have to be the same type of cell. So kind of like I was saying, you can start in the pancreas and it can go all the way to another cell that isn't even a pancreatic cell. The key to this is the circulatory system. It has to go through the bloodstream. This is not the type of thing where it hops in your bone marrow and goes through. It can't do that. The key to endocrine signaling is that it goes through your bloodstream. It hops on a blood cell or through a blood cell. I always like to think of it as Finding Nemo. You know that part where they're in the current with the turtles? And I can't remember what the current's called, but the baby turtle is all like, this is totally awesome. And then Marlin's just like panicking, but also having a great time. And Dory doesn't know what's going on. But I always think of it like that current from Finding Nemo, where they're just kind of flowing and they get dropped off wherever. That's what endocrine signaling is like. They just get sucked into a current and they just flow and they get dropped off wherever. But here's where endocrine signaling gets cool. So endocrine signaling, if it's going through your bloodstream, let's say that I made a hormone that turns me purple. I don't know. A hormone that turns me purple. And I made it in my brain. And so it's going to get released through my bloodstream and go all the way through my entire body. I mean, it's going to go to my feet and my hands and my nose and everything. But I don't turn purple everywhere because I don't have receptors for that particular purple making thing in any of my cells. Except, I don't know, maybe my ear's going to be purple today. I don't know. Another example could be certain sex hormones. Again, they are made somewhere in your body and then they travel through your bloodstream, through your entire body. That's why they can take a blood test and find out like what your estrogen levels, your testosterone levels. They don't have to go to your ovaries or your testes or whatever other sex organ. They can get it out of your blood because that's what it rides through. Now that estrogen doesn't affect like say my nose or my eyeballs, at least not significantly. I hope they don't because that would be weird. They don't affect there. They affect what they're supposed to. It makes me a lady. It's very nice, la, la, la. My point being, it touches all my cells. It goes to all my cells. But as you can see in this upper diagram, not every cell has a receptor. Yeah, estrogen can travel through my bloodstream up to my ears. But my ears are going to stay my ears because they don't have estrogen receptors. So the hormone's going to pass through and be like, no, it's not here. And then just keep going until it hits the organ and the cells that it's supposed to hit. And that's where it's going to have the receptor. It's going to act on it. So that's endocrine. It only works if it hits a receptor. Any questions about endocrine? Any questions about endocrine? 3, 2, 1. All right, let's check the next thing out. So let's take a look at some examples of a juxtacrine. So juxtacrine, we have one here. What's this thing up top on the left? What are those thingies? What are those lovely gems? Take a guess, any guess. I want to hear it. Tell me the thoughts in your brain. Immune system cells, very good, Dakota. So we've got a macrophage and a T cell, and do you notice how these guys have to actually touch and lock into one another, similar to enzymes? And that's the only way that they can activate the other. So the macrophage has to activate the T cell by having a juxtacrine response. They have to interlock, connect. It's like a lock and a key, very good. And so you can kind of see Over here, I've got like a little animation of an immune cell because they actually have to crawl around like this until they hit whatever they need and then tell it, oh, hey, you need to ring the alarm. Da, 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 da. That's what it does. And then I've got our example of the synapses down on the bottom right. So you can see that they're right next to each other. Can anyone tell me what that green thing is though? You get a gold star if you know it. Because that's a good one. What's that green thing? Think. It starts with a P. It's green. It has to do with plants. 3, 2, 1. 0.5. All right, it's a tough one. I'll go ahead and tell y'all. So this green one, we got these little squares. These little squares are plant cells because they're square and they're green. That's what plants do. But you may notice they've got like these little junctions. They're like tunnels going to the next one. We call those Plasmodesmata. Here, I'll type it in the chat for y'all because if I try to spell it, we're going to be here for 12 days. Plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata are just little channels that connect one plant cell to another plant cell. Why can't they just release stuff off their cell membrane like everybody else? Why do they have to have a whole little special tunnel through their to connect to each other? Why can't they just release out of their cell membrane? They have a cell wall. Very good, Dakota. So plants, if you remember, they have a cell wall. So they're solid. They have their armor. Cell signals can't wiggle through armor. They get stuck on the inside. And so they have to have plasmodesmata, which is like a little railway system that says, okay, you go here, and you go here, and you go there. Plasmodesmata are going to be that type of juxtacrine response or communication that lets it travel to other plant cells. Any questions about that juxtacrine? I know I'm going pretty fast, but I feel like this is pretty straightforward. If it's not, please tell me. Two, one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on. Here we go. Let's talk about quorum sensing. I love quorum sensing. It is fascinating. So quorum sensing, this is actually something that occurs in your cells all the time. It's what tells your cells, hey, it's time to divide, or hey, it's not time to divide. It also happens in bacteria. It's basically a way of population control, and it has to do with autocrine and paracrine signaling. So the idea is that if you have a little celly cell, so basically, if it's receiving a molecule, that's going to tell it to divide. But if it's not receiving a molecule, back up the train. If it's receiving a molecule, like these little orange things, that's going to tell it, especially if it receives it too often, it's going to tell it stop dividing. The gene expression that it's talking about here is division. The genes that tell a cell it's time to divide, it's time to divide. But if it's getting that little orange triangle molecule too often, that enzyme, that's going to tell the cell, hey, there's a lot of these being produced. Someone must be producing them. So we should stop dividing because we got plenty of cells. We don't need any more. We're going to use up all our resources if we do that. That's quorum sensing. Meanwhile, if a cell isn't getting that signal, it's going to start dividing because it's like, I'm alone and I need friends. That's what it's going to do. So in a way, that protein in the quorum sensing is acting like an inhibitor. This is also going to be really important, though, in cancerous cells, which do kind of the opposite. So in your body, have you ever noticed, it's kind of gross, but like if you've ever bled, which I'm sure most of you have done at some point in your life, you get your blood on something, you get your dead skin cells on something. Does your dead skin divide on your tissue or your Band-Aid or whatever you left it on? Does your like blood and guts or whatever you've left behind, can it divide when it's detached from your body? No. Very good, Slay. It can't. And the reason for that is your cells can sense when it's next to other cells. And if it senses it has been disconnected or it senses that low cell density, it does the reverse. It will stop dividing. It'll say, well, too late. We've been thrown off the island. We're dead. Unless they're cancerous. That gene is disabled, and it doesn't matter how many cells or if it's been detached. they will keep growing. And that's how cancerous tumors get started, because they don't have the gene expression to control for this quorum sensing. Any questions about this one? It's fascinating. All right, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about endocrine. So an example of endocrine is going to be this communication that's going to maintain homeostasis in the body. To be clear, the majority of signaling is to maintain homeostasis in your body, but endocrine especially. Some examples that you can talk about on an FRQ would be diabetes, which relies on insulin. So there's two types of diabetes, and to be perfectly honest, this always confused me until I taught biology. There's type 1, which typically happens when people are younger. It's considered an autoimmune disorder, and it's also termed, I think, juvenile diabetes. Whereas type 2 is typically something you get when you're a little older and a little easier to control, to be perfectly honest. So with type 1 diabetes, it doesn't make any insulin. The receptor's there, but the pancreas is like, nah, I'm not going to do that today or ever. And so they constantly have to have a pump or some source of insulin. Type 2 is the exact opposite. Type 2 diabetes, you make tons and tons of insulin, but there's no receptor for it. Or that receptor is somehow blocked by another molecule. And so you can't break down your sugar, and that's when they go into that hyperglycemia, that shock. So both of those are going to be critical to hormones. Normally, you should be able to just have some insulin, and it goes to a receiver, and everything's fine. Obviously, not always going to happen here. Another example is going to be human growth hormone. This is another one that's got to travel all the way through the body. Does literally what it says. It makes you grow. And then another one that they love to ask about is testosterone and estrogen. So these go through feedback loops of how they're going to affect your body. Like I said, they're going to be made in one part of your body, the pituitary, the hypothalamus, but they're going to they're going to be made in the ovaries and the testes, but they can act on the pituitary and the hypothalamus. So again, traveling all the way through the body, they only actually affect these parts of the brain, even though they literally go through all of your body. Any questions about that endocrine? Three, two, one. All right. Ooh, y'all want to do some practice problems? I got 3 of them for you tonight. Nod your heads, yes. I can't see them, but I'm going to go with it. Yes. Yay. Yay, Sandra. Yay, Dakota. Yay. Okay, here we go. Let's look at this first one. So here I've got cell communication is critical for the function of both unicellular and multicellular eukaryotes. Which of the following is true of cell signaling? Oh, Soleil, thank you for smiling. So what do y'all think? A, B, C, D? I see 2 people who say C. What do my other participants think? Give me at least one more with an answer. Un más? Very good, Soleil. Very good, Omi-san. Yay, Omi-san, I'm so glad you're here. Sandra, hey. Yes, the answer is C. So we, for example, have very similar cell signaling pathways to other organisms. Like I have a dog, she probably uses the same one. I have a husband, he's a boy, but he's still human, and we use the same one. And so this is usually whenever you have the same metabolic pathway or process or proteins in your body, that's usually going to be a signal that you are somehow evolutionarily related, even if you're not the same species. So very good. All right, let's look at number 2. Oh, I gotta click the other thingy. Haha, I knew that. All right. Practice AP question number 2. I got a picture with this one. Steroid hormones, such as testosterone, pass through the plasma membrane and bind to an intracellular protein as shown in the diagram below. To the right, sorry. The hormone receptor complex then enters the nucleus where it interacts with DNA to promote transcription of a specific gene. based on the information presented, which of the following will also recur in a response to steroid signaling? So this one's a little bit advanced because it's going into that DNA and genes. But I still want to see what y'all know, because this is a possible one. It's in the question bank. What do y'all think? If you don't know which one it is, tell me which one you think it is not. You can say not letter. Okay, I see D. Even one or two more. What do y'all think? I don't think it's B. Okay, Omi-san, I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's not B. Very good, Sandra. So be real careful here. Does transcription make histones? What does transcription make? It's okay, Soleil. You getting it? So the answer's got to be D, because transcription is going to start making that mRNA. Remember the central diagram, DNA to mRNA to protein? So it's going to be D. Very good, guys. All right, we got one more for you. Are you ready? All right, so this one, I forgot to number it. That's my bad. Just tell me if you think it's upper left, upper right, lower right. What do y'all think? Transmission of an action potential across a synapse, that's those neurons, involves the release of neurotransmitters by a presynaptic neuron. The arrival of the action potential triggers a rise in calcium in the synaptic terminal, and the change in concentration triggers a release of neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. That cleft is going to be the gap between the two synapses. Which of the following representations of the movement of calcium, sodium, and potassium best shows how an action potential is transmitted? So I know two of you have had this before, so you should have a pretty good idea. If you don't, you can learn now. But pay very special attention to the way the arrows are flowing. And also think of structure and function that you've learned about before. Certain pumps. So think of sodium and potassium pump. Which one goes in and which one goes out with the sodium potassium pump? Maybe top left or bottom right. So I'm going to challenge the top left because we've got sodium coming in and potassium coming out, which I believe is the opposite of how the sodium potassium pump works. But on the bottom right, we do have that potassium going in and the sodium going out. Do we see another one that's doing that? The proper sodium potassium pumping? Because remember, that's the only way sodium and potassium are going to move, is through that pump. Top right. So top right again has sodium coming in. Bottom left has both sodium and potassium going out. So if sodium and potassium, does that work for the sodium potassium pump? Can both be going out? It's got to be the bottom right, because the bottom right is the only one that is properly doing the sodium potassium pump. Remember, whenever that pump is working, this is going back to an old unit, but this is how you can do this, even if you haven't seen the specific example. In the sodium potassium pump, Sodium goes out, potassium goes in. That's why you eat a banana when you get a leg cramp, because it kicks the sodium out. So the correct answer is going to be the bottom right. All right. These were some tricky ones tonight. Guys, I'm going to be perfectly honest. My computer is dying, though. So I'm going to move into final questions. Does anyone have any final questions tonight? Three, two, one. A brief overview of the 4 types? Yes, I can. So remember, autocrine is going to be when it sends a signal to itself, self-signal. Paracrine is like blowing on a dandelion. It sends it out, but not very far. Endocrine is going to be all across the body through the bloodstream. And then juxtacrine, they're going to be the ones that are right next to each other. They're actually connected, like those plasmodesmata, those junctions in the plants. Does that help? What types of receptors are important to cell communication? Kinase is not a receptor. That's going to be an activator. That's going to be an enzyme that actually activates it. I can't tell you at this time what receptors are specifically important. That's not in this particular module, but I'll have that in my next session on December 5th. I will say you should know probably the inhibition that you learned in the last unit. That's going to be really important. Allosteric and competitive. Tyrosine kinase. So it's a kinase, but it's a different type of kinase. It's like saying blueberry pancakes are pancakes, but they're different than regular pancakes. All right, guys, I am so sorry tonight, but my computer is dying and I left my charger at home or at school. I know I am horrible. I've got to hop off. If you have any questions, here is my Twitter. Feel free to send me a message. I am so happy to help. Dakota, I'm so glad I helped you. Sandra, it was good to see you. Elena, Soleil, Omi-san, all you guys. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm looking forward to seeing y'all on December 5th. I hope y'all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.